a way of remembering someone, including our memorial garden, and so I see that as a shift.
Yeah, absolutely. Marilyn, I'll run this over to you.
Several things come to mind. Family participation. I think maybe we sing hymns. More hymns, but I think there used to be maybe soloists. I'm not sure. And
Yeah, thank you. So even some of the way that the service has happened, or the way in which maybe we're doing more congregational singing, less special music sometimes. Yeah, this can be things. All right. Yeah, Judy, one more.
Being of sound mind, I am getting closer to the end of my life than I am further away. And one of the things that Amy and I have done is made a list and have filled a book kind of like of music. Good grief, I think we got 40 hymns. And, you know,
The planning.
words from the gospel and
Yep.
other places
Yeah.
are very important, and you try to make up your mind.
Yep. All right. Planning.
I've also noticed among Christians that they talk about being reunited or united with their family members rather than the uncertainty of, you know, what is going to happen. We are going to be with Christ, we know that. But Christ himself said, you know, we don't know what happens, you know, after we get there. But it's very prevalent. You know, we will see or be with our husband or whatever.
I think that's a reflection of family participation more than a change in our liturgy, because, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to also just now add another layer of our conversation a little bit, so we can keep reflecting on this, but I also want to add, is there anything that you notice has changed since the year 2020? Nothing happened in 2020. I'm just arbitrarily picking a year, right? Obviously, I'm kidding, right? There's the pandemic, right? So has anything changed since then that you have noticed? Yeah, Madon and then Elaine. And then Vicky.
Cremation has become much more common.
Yeah. Okay. Good one. Elaine.
I believe that if it's a funeral, memorial service, or whatever, it doesn't take place as soon as it used to. I mean, when somebody died, you knew the funeral was going to be taking place within the week. I don't think that's true anymore.
Yeah.
Vicky.
The advent of Zoom and people participating in funerals from a distance, because now they can just tune in to Zoom and still be part of the funeral rather than having to get on a plane or drive.
Yeah. Yep. Good. Others? Dennis? A microphone's going to come to you in a minute. There we go.
I've noticed the cremation since the COVID, but the celebration of life, which somebody mentioned earlier, but I've also noticed several times that people have said they'll have one later on, but years have gone by and there never was one. And that's really sad to me. I've noticed that a lot more.
Yeah. Funeral as optional is something that I think has really has started to happen. Like, maybe we'll do something at some point, but like even the maybe, right? Like, it is there. So, yeah. Yeah.
To add on to that, 2 years ago, this was feeling heavy on my mind, and can I borrow your microphone?
Oh, yeah.
The possibility that there might not be a service, or that it might be far into the future. When I first was part of the staff at Third Reformed, it was sort of talked about that we averaged possibly a dozen funerals in a year. In 2023, I looked at our list at the end of the year. It was probably a list for All Saints Day, and there had been 15 who went to their rest, but we had had 3 funerals in the building of our church. And so there was a data point to go with that shift. I want to make sure that more people get a chance to share, but I have a little more to add to that but I'll let others people go first. Anyone else about that?
Question, does it cost more to have it in the church?
No. I'm not your cost expert, but there are, depending on what's chosen for the logistics and the day and procedures, could cost less. Yeah. The family of the deceased. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just talking a little bit more about sort of the changing or pushing out of dates and things like that. I've noticed a trend, observed it. I don't want to make a judgment call about it, but I've observed that as families coming out of COVID with the prevalence of cremation, the idea of choosing a date when all the kids are out of school, or the family would be getting together, or there was already a reunion in the summer that we look forward to. I've noticed the date being chosen along those lines, which can be really great so that people aren't having to scramble or miss something that's incredibly important as a family. It does change the dynamics for the volunteer availability and the staffing and things like that on the end of the facilitators. But it is something that has been observable in the last year.
Food has changed.
Food has changed?
He's going to use this. I'm going to check.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. So I think before I know that Janelle has some things to share, I would offer a couple of things that I've seen, and we're going to dig into this more a little bit, but something that I've noticed shift sharply through the course of my ministry is how a person is identified. So where identity is. And they will talk about this a lot in The Good Funeral, and I'm so glad they do, because Tom Lynch will tell stories about having to dig a grave big enough to bury a man in his golf cart. Because, first and foremostly, he was a golfer. And that is what the family wants. And I have seen this and had to participate in funerals where everything that we needed to talk about was about this person's life as fill in the blank, right? Like this person was a teacher. Everything has to be about teaching. So like we're going to have pencils and things present and I don't want to downplay those things. We're going to talk about this in a little bit, but that is also something that I think in the course of my ministry, if you would have told me as a seminary student in 2005 and now here, I would be like, what? But identity is definitely one of those things. And I think the other one that I've really noticed is the remaining family's relationship to the church has been something that has really shifted. So as we as pastors talk with families about funerals, we are speaking more often with family that does not have a current relationship with the church themselves. And so I'll never forget, I have a good friend back in Ann Arbor who converted to Islam, and one of the reasons she converted to Islam was because there was more of an identified theology about things, and that was really appealing to her, and other reasons. I don't want to make it just about that. But so I remember asking her about funerals once, and I was like, well, in your Christian tradition growing up, what was your theology of a funeral? And she goes, oh, simple, we didn't have one. Right? Like, so there is the idea that a member of a congregation could pass away, and I don't want to out any Christian traditions, but there are some that hold these ideas way more loosely than other traditions. And one of the things I might posit for us is when you hold those things loosely, other things might fill in the gap. Okay? All right, Pastor Janelle.
Because we belong to a tradition that does value celebrating our identity in Christ, the promise of resurrected life and new creation, we think of it as an important ministry of our church, not just from the pastors, but for walking alongside families and individuals who are facing imminent loss or who have just lost someone. There are ways that our congregation has done that for years. Those ways continue to evolve, but I believe that they still have the same meaning and importance for us as we walk together. Your pastors and your care elders seek to be there for people, to reach out to them. Ideally, communication and prayer requests and things like that lead us to know when we might be needed. But if there's any doubt in your mind that your pastor or your care elder would like to come and visit you or pray with you, if you are facing hard news or short time, please know that we are eager to do that and want to be informed and want to be involved and available to you. We have lots of understanding amongst the three pastors that one of us will go as soon as possible, and we will. You don't have to worry about who it is. We'll work that out. But that is a commitment that we have to you as a congregation. The care elders have lots of ways that we encourage the congregation to join together in sharing encouragement, prayers, cards, occasionally meals, and we do our best to understand the uniqueness of each situation. We also recognize that if someone has passed, that there may be a flooding in of family or friends that are coming around side, and so our desire is to be available, but also to be available when all of that community time shifts. And we know that we're not perfect. We're continuing to learn, we're continuing to grow, and we count on the congregation to help us to stay informed and to join us in those things, such as hosting a reception or visiting and that kind of thing. Those are some of the ways that we as a congregation come together around loss. And it's been pointed out already, but it's worth reiterating. In many cases, members of our church might pass, and we have not had the opportunity because of distance or different church membership or things like that, to not have had a chance to know the family. And we hope to be able to get to know a family, to make them feel comfortable in our church, to make them feel welcome, especially if they have a reason or a feeling about what it means or doesn't mean to belong in church. And we do our very best to try to understand the situation for each family and not to make generalizations. TRC also walks with a family who has faced loss by interacting with the funeral home, if there is one that's been engaged in service. This can be an interesting sort of chicken and an egg scenario. When someone passes, the first logistical call to make is to the funeral home. We understand that. And their desire is to serve and to provide their services as quickly as possible. Sometimes it means that plans can reach us, and we would love to be involved as soon as possible in creating what's desired for the service and letting you know what our church can do for you that you might otherwise be offered from an institution. And for example, we'll provide a bulletin. We'll provide ushers if we need to, and there's some services like that we can help with and lighten the load and just take off the plate of a family with so many decisions to make. And I already mentioned interacting with the family, but we take the time when a service becomes needed to meet with whichever members of the family would like to gather to talk about, first of all, to be prayed for and to be comforted, but also to talk about favorite scriptures and hymns. And this is one of the best parts of this job, is to ask people to tell us about your loved one. And it's so sacred and tender, and to be able to learn from a person's story and help translate it into a testimony and connect it to the promises of God's word when we do gather. Along those lines, I wanted to let you know that we have a couple resources we hope that you'll take advantage of today. We have some copies, and many more can be made, or digital versions can be emailed out. But there is a booklet that has been put together by church staff called Planning a Memorial Service. Memorial service as a placeholder for the name that we actually call our service, the celebration of the resurrection. But it gives you as an individual, or you and your family, depending on your circumstances, a chance to think through some of the planning aspects, and then to hand a folder or a handwritten page or an email to Kristen in the office or to a pastor when we're visiting, and you can know that those plans are kept on file. They can be updated, they can be changed, but if it gives you peace of mind or gives your family peace of mind to know that that planning has at least begun, we would love for you to have a look at these. There's a stack of them on the organ in the back, and you can grab one if you'd like. And if you have questions about it, we're always happy to meet and to talk about it and to answer questions. We also have at Third Reformed, many of you know this, but I know that not everyone knows this. In the last 4 or 5 years, Third has developed a memorial garden for cremains. It's on the 12th Street side. When you come into the back of the sanctuary and you go through the gallery of windows, and there's a beautiful blooming tree outside the window. It probably looks gorgeous right now. I didn't go through that door today. Look down and you'll see that there are place markers. Some of them have been claimed and occupied, and there are spaces for more. And that is our memorial garden for ashes. This booklet gives you more information if you would like to reserve a place in that garden and have you and or your loved one's ashes placed near your church home and remembered by your church family in that way. And so you can find out more information about that. From a very practical standpoint, you don't need this yet. I hope that no one needs it soon. But this is just for your curiosity's sake, the checklist that our staff uses when we meet with a family. You can have a look at it, and there's nothing on here that will surprise you, but it sure helps a staff that includes ministers, office administration, technical staff, or technical volunteers if there's Zoom, Linda for music, and the funeral home. This is sort of like data central that we look to once we've filled it out. We make copies of it and email it out to everyone involved, so we're all working off the same page, and it has offered some help to us to kind of keep all the threads moving in the same direction. But you don't need this, but it's there for your curiosity's sake. Any questions about any of those things?
All right, seeing none, we're going to just keep on moving. One of the things we'd really like to spend a little time talking with y'all about now is, as Janelle kind of lays out these both logistical things, and as we've laid out sort of a background for where our starting point is, we want to communicate with you about some things that would be really helpful for you to know and think about as you may have to start planning a service for yourself or somebody else. I know that I already make notes about mine someday, right? Because we never know. We're not promised any number of days, right? So but there are things. We sang one of the hymns this morning. I know that Christ is raised, right? I love that one. Sing that if I die before you, please. Sing it here. Because it is a joyful sort of song, and but we want to make sure to communicate a couple of things, and here is one that we really want to make sure, and hopefully, Bill, this gets at a bit of your answer to your question about, well, whose service is this, right? And in our tradition, this is a service of the family. It's not a service of the church. It is different. However, I would tell you as a minister, that's practically not true. It's a service that is for the family and is for the congregation if that person is a member of that congregation. And so that produces can produce kind of a sticky point in that relationship, because a family, you don't need a minister present to have a funeral in our tradition. I don't have to be there, right? Like, that is something you could just do, and your family could get together, you could have a service of remembrance, and you're off and running. That makes me personally very uncomfortable. You should just know that. And so one of the things that we've talked about here at Third Reformed Church is that if you would like to have a service in the building, if you would like to use our sanctuary, one of the things that we would request is that an installed minister of Third Reformed Church do 2 of the 3 following things: the greeting, the welcome, the blessing, and the preaching. So 2 of those 3 things at the very least. If you want someone else to offer a homily, we understand. There are people that are important, maybe a different minister in the family or a friend, or that's great. And we want to work with anybody that you think would do something, do a great job. Then you might want to say, well, we would really love somebody to come in and offer a prayer. That's wonderful. Again, whoever you want to have come and participate, we want to help you do that well. Okay? But we as ministers of Third Reformed Church also want to be able to welcome people on behalf of Third Reformed Church into a space, not because we want to be territorial, but because it helps us orient ourselves right and everybody there as to we are gathering to celebrate a member of Third Reformed Church who has passed. And the benediction, obviously, too, on behalf of God's people, right? So those are the things, and in addition to the other Reformed parts of the liturgy that we like to put in, we just like to share that with families up front. And so Pastor Janelle, Pastor Angel, and Jim Neville has also been participating. We have a great relationship with Jim as a calling pastor. We just say, hey, we know that we're going to do these things, and that's how we're going to do them. And we have that shared understanding amongst ourselves. We'd really like for you to know that shared understanding also.
Also, from a logistics standpoint, which is far more boots on the ground, but there's a fair number of volunteers involved in a memorial service at church, from musicians to the people who may be running the sound, to the office staff, to those preparing for a reception. And it's really helpful if the person who is directing the service, even if they're not doing all of the parts, is someone that the team here that's working really hard to put together a beautiful day that they can relate to and communicate with well and well-opened channels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Pastor Janelle, because we can't stress that enough, right? Like,
it's not just us.
The amount of people that it takes to help this be a service, again, and Vicki, I'm so glad you brought up, like, with the advent of Zoom and online participation and sound and all of the wonderful blessing that's been for us, it takes people to do all of that. And we're calling in people sometimes on a Thursday morning for a funeral at 9 a.m., then we want to make sure that we do that well for the family, and we're asking other people to come in and help us. So having a point person that is a pastor on staff can really help us do that, because your pastors create those services in-house. We do that work, and we get that in front of our tech people and all of our office administrators and things like that. So we want you to know that. I'd also say that this conversation partly gets into the identity conversation. And we want to really lift that up a minute to spend a little time with you in remembering that when we have a service here at Third Reformed Church, what we are first called to do as not just pastors, but as a congregation together, our primary job, your primary job as a fellow congregant, is to help pass that person into the waiting arms of Jesus Christ. That's our job together. That's what we do. And so whatever identity that person might have had in their vocation or in their family life, whatever made that person whole, we want to make sure to highlight all of those things. And we want to make sure to lift all those things up. But first and foremost, that person is a child of God in Jesus Christ. And that is what, if we do funerals here, that is what we are going to lift up first.
Amen.
And we want to make sure that you know that that's our baseline here. And there's a reason for that, again, because there's a whole lot of identifiers that people would like to overlay onto something about who that person was, how they experienced them as a parent, or how they experienced them as a fellow person that shares a vocation, a professor, a teacher, and so like we want to make sure that we also highlight those things. And again, the passing relationship with church that some of the still living family members might have. I have been told before in a family planning meeting, don't mention Jesus in the funeral. And here's the rub. These children of the person deceased don't mention Jesus. We have people in our family that don't go to church. They're going to feel guilty if you belong to Jesus. And I just say, well, I don't say this to the family, but my feeling is, but I know this person who passed. I know their life of faith. They wouldn't want me to not mention Jesus. Jesus was everything to that person. And so there is this tension that your pastors can feel about that, to say, okay, well, what do we do in that case, right? And how do you not preach the gospel when we're called to preach the gospel, right? And so when we have things like that, you need to know that we are always delicately trying to navigate that with families. And so if you have wishes ahead of time about how you would like to be remembered, you would do well to get those on file. Put those in writing. Talk to your family about them. Talk to your friends. What do you want people to know? How do you want them to remember you, right? Like, we don't get to dictate all of it because people are people. They get to say things, right? But as far as how do you want the church to help you be remembered in this moment, you still have some control over. There are some things that you could do, and in this communication, your pastors are always willing and able to help you do that, okay?
And I think I agree with all of that, and know that it can lead our imaginations to go in all kinds of creative and interesting ways. I want to emphasize that the particular ways that are most helpful to us are if there is scripture that has been formative for you, a song that has been a comfort to you, so that we can incorporate them into the service that is a worship service. Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the ways, and we as pastors want to talk about one of the ways that this can show up, and we want to be really clear about our position that we communicate to all of you, and as we communicate it to the funeral homes. And this is about any kind of civic or military honors. These things are an important part of some people's lives, people that have served militarily or people that have done other things in civic society that bear honoring and remembering. Hear us say as pastors, we understand that, and we don't want to not honor them in that person in that way. We do believe that those things happen outside of the Christian worship service. And so military honors or a flag draping the casket in the Christian worship service, we're not going to do here at Third. How we would love to walk with the family or person around that honor is in ways that we've done it recently. If you've been to a funeral recently, we've had a couple for like Ed Steelstra or Bob Kuiper. We'd love to get people out, in particular in the outside of the covered entrance, because regardless of weather and accessibility, that's the friendliest place to have it for the most amount of people. And if there is honors and a flag presented to family, we want to help the family have that moment. We recognize that's important, okay? But we also want to think about accessibility and think about the fact that that doesn't happen after the prelude or before the postlude. right? That those things that is an outside of the Christian experience. It is add extra to that. So we want to, and I think we've had a couple other ways, and so it's not just military, but there are other organizations that might want to do some things like that. We will also point to, in the service, if the family wishes, well, could you point to the fact that they were a service member? Of course we can, and we can talk about that part of that is part of celebrating. What we want you to hear from us as pastors is there is a difference between recognizing the child of God and their full identity of Christ in those various capacities versus recognizing a soldier that happened to have a faith or recognizing a professor who happened to go to church, right? Like whatever, we want to lift up that primacy of identity and let the other things say these things were informed by who this person was as a child of Christ. We just said a couple of really big things, so I just want to pause. Are there any questions or comments for clarification on those things? And I can run a mic to people.
A lot of things come to mind, but how do you deal, because I've had to deal with this a lot when I was pastor in New York, with someone you know has no faith and they're coming to church simply because the ritual of burial and funeral is something that they do because it's a part of their family heritage. And now you have to address, because you've just been talking about somebody who's a child of God, clearly a person of faith, and I think you're talking to the choir here, but when you're not talking to the choir,
sure.
How do you deal with that? Because I've had to deal with that. In fact, this one's a bit raw because just a week ago, we said goodbye to my brother, and no one in the room at the coffee house where we gathered for the celebration of life goes to church. There were several who were very angry with the church, and I was asked to speak. So I'm just wondering how you deal with that then, Ryan.
Well, do you want to go first? We too have had this experience. I think most of the funerals in my first pastorate fell into that category because I served a congregation that demographically was a bit younger, and so I was helping them to say goodbye to their parents or their aunts and uncles or their grandparents, and their connection was to our congregation, but their families wasn't. So I remember the first time that I had this experience, the members of my congregation even asked me to go to the hospital to get her to say the sinner's prayer before she died. And my congregant was so desperate for them to know God's promises, and they were the only one in their family who felt that way. So ministering to congregants and their family, I had to be very careful and very specific and intentional. I took a page out of Paul's book where he said, whatever is good, whatever is excellent, think about these things, and was able to craft a service that pointed to God's promises and then tried to lift up what they hoped for in remembering their mother who had passed, and painting a picture of what love looks like and giving the invitation that perfect love comes from God. It was not a time to say things that I knew people didn't, I didn't want to put words in anyone's mouths, but God's promises are true. And a funeral is many things, and on the list of things that it is an invitation. And weirdly enough, people who are attending a service, whether or not they come with a heart full of faith, they're certainly coming with a heart full of questions. And so we have an opportunity as a church to offer an invitation and to proclaim promises. And we pray before we walk in that door, and while we're speaking, that the Holy Spirit will be tending to those listening.
Yeah, that's really well said, Janelle. And I want to acknowledge, John, the situation you just described is really difficult, and I can only imagine. I know you did well in that moment, I'm sure, but it is difficult. And I'm really thankful that you brought that up, because we are talking about two different things, right? It's important to acknowledge that what we're talking about and the assumptions that we're having pertain to a Christian funeral. And in particular, members of Third Reformed Church. So there's a like concentric circle conversation here. We're right now talking about the immediate center. If you, as a member of Third Reformed Church, pass away, this is how we would really like this to go, and how we want you to know our theological perspective so that you and your family can feel comforted in that space. And you described an outside layer that is fraught. And I join you in that as a pastor that's had to step into those places and feeling at a loss and praying that the Spirit guide, right? And I appreciate your perspective on that, Janelle, as well.
It's also perfectly okay for, and frankly welcomed, if you have a concern about how your children will interact with church preparations for a service. You can let us know that. It won't be surprising to us or the first time we've ever been in that situation, but if you think it will help to soften tensions or anxiousness, you can let us know those things. We'll handle it.
Amen.
As we can.
Yeah, Russ, so let me get a mic to you.
It helps to be a pastor's kid listening to pastors' take on things I've often had in common with pastors as a doctor. Creative problem solving all day long and doing homework at night. But what you're describing here is what I learned as chief of the medical staff at Holland Hospital. Nobody had lasted more than 12 months. I did 28 months of herding cats through what I called assertive diplomacy. You can't please everybody, but get a job done well, and if you get the respect, that's enough.
I see a hand with Kathy at the back. Let me run that over.
Just a couple things. I've witnessed a funeral bringing a family back together. I worked at hospice for many years, and this family was estranged, really angry with one another. And for a while, there was no service because of that. And then we got the call that could we have a service in the chapel at hospice? And they did, and it was a grace upon grace to see this family gradually come together and talk and hug. And that would not have happened if it were not for the funeral and the memorial and the family sharing stories and talking about Jesus, quite honestly. And my second comment is just an informational point. You talked about preparing information for funerals ahead of time. There is a document that some of you, I'm guessing you're aware of, called 5 Wishes, which is an advance directive. It's a legal document, and it has 2 pages at the end for funeral planning and what your desires of songs or prayers would be. And it is legally binding, just like an advance directive. So, another resource.
Thank you, Kathy.
There was a comment up here about someone who's familiar with the checklist or the booklet that we have, saying some of these questions are not in the booklet. It would be a much longer booklet if we put every question in there, but we want it to be a starting place for you. We're not going to just file it without reading it. We will follow up. So if you fill that out, you can ask for, or you can expect one of the ministers to follow up with you. And if it's not in writing, it's known, and we can have our notes.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge that it's time. We are at 12:15. I want to thank you. There's a whole lot more Janelle and I would love to tell you, and we knew that we were going to be short on time today, but we're really grateful that you gave us your time and attention to these things. It's important that we're thinking about these things regardless of where we are on our life's journey, and if there are any more questions that you have specifically about how to funeral plan or anything, feel free to talk to Janelle and I. We do have a number of handouts in print if you'd like to take some with you, and we can always make more. Yeah, thank you for that.
I will add the checklist to the back, and they're on the organ back there. But please let us know how we can serve you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yes, I will. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Grace and peace, friends. Thanks for coming.